Hello, my name is Dee and welcome to Books and Quirks. Today I'm going to be doing my May wrap up. So May is now over. We're entering a new month in the month of June, and I was pretty successful in May. I read a total of 13 books, and what helped with that was that Ripsat also happened in May. So I got a lot of reading done that one week, and then I just kind of took my time the rest of the month. So I'm going to quickly go through the 13 books. I don't want this video to be too long, and I'll give just a brief, couple of sentences about each. So let's get started. Okay, so the first book that I finished in May is Flawed by Cecilia Ahern. Flawed is a dystopian novel. I actually got it in my April Owl Crate that I unboxed on video, and this takes place in a society where if you have a characteristic that is frowned upon, or you do something that's considered immoral like stealing or lying, then you're considered flawed. And if you're flawed, you're branded on your skin so everyone knows that you're flawed, and you're sort of looked upon as a second-class citizen. And it's a really fascinating book, and I think it's going to be a series. I know there's a second book that's going to come out next year. I don't know if it's just a duology or a trilogy, but I'm really looking forward to the second book because I absolutely loved this book. I think I gave it 4 or 5 stars on Goodreads, and I absolutely adored it. So I can't wait for the second book to come about. Okay, so the second book, and this was during Ripsat actually, so the first book that I read during Ripsat was Flawed. And the second book that I picked up is A Glittering Court by Rochelle Mead. This was another book that I absolutely loved. I've heard a few reviews online through BookTube, and some are good reviews, but some are also very poor reviews. So I would watch, both sides of the coin to make an informed decision as to whether you want to give this a shot. But I personally loved it, and I think I'm going to be doing a full review on this book just to give my opinions on why I thought it was so great. But also Stephanie from Stephanie Bain's channel did a really great review, a positive review, but a good review of this book, and I thought she was really eloquent in the way she spoke. And I think looking up her review would be a good place to start for a positive viewing, and then you can look elsewhere on YouTube for maybe a negative review to see what you think. But I thought it was original, I thought it was gripping, and I thought the character development was phenomenal. And I loved this book, and I think the only thing I'll say is that I think if you like the Selection series, you'll love this book. That's my personal opinion. It has a couple of elements of the Selection, but it's a completely different story, so you don't need to worry about, that it copied the story or anything like that, because it totally didn't. But it's just, in my opinion, a great, great book. The next book that I read was Conversion by Catherine Howe. And Catherine Howe wrote an adult fantasy book, paranormal book, called The Physic Book of Deliverance Dane. And I read that a couple years ago, and I absolutely loved it. This is a YA book that came out a couple of years ago, brand new by her. And I didn't like this one. I gave it 3 stars. I found it enjoyable enough. I just thought it was okay. Basically, I just thought it was an okay book, but I had some problems with it. First of all, so this book is a modern day retelling of like the Salem witch trials. The real historical event of the Salem witch trials. And it does go back and forth. So parts of the book are taking place in the early or late 1600s or early 1700s, when the real story of what happened to those girls during the Salem witch trials, the truth came about. and modern day, where similar things are sort of happening. Um, Within high school, there are a group of girls that start having unexplained fits. You know, they have these, I don't even know how to describe them. They scream, they have no control over their voice, they have no control over their body, and it seems very, very similar to the accounts of what happened in the 1600s when those women were hung because of, you know, they were being accused of witchcraft. So I thought the premise was absolutely fascinating. Like I said, I loved Catherine Howe's, you know, adult book a few years ago, and I thought, you know, she's writing this new YA novel. And Catherine Howe, a fun fact about this author is that she is actually a direct descendant of one of the witches of the Salem witch trial. Well, she wasn't a witch, but one of the women that was hanged during that whole period. So a lot of her books deal with witches, and but I just thought this story was very slow, and it breaks my heart to say it, but it was just very boring. And in the end, I just didn't even think that, you know, it wrapped it up very well, and I could have done without this book, to be quite honest. And I really wanted to love it because I loved her other books. Okay, so the next book that I read during Ripsat after reading that disappointing book was a great one, and that was The Raven King by Maggie Stiefvater. I won't go into this book because I've spoken about it in a couple other videos because I was so psyched because this book just came out in April and I was so excited for it, and you know how much I love the Raven Boys quartet series. And it was just such, it blew me away. I was so happy with this book. I was so happy with the way everything wrapped up with Blue and Gansey and Ronan and the whole gang. So I just really love this book, and you know, I'm eager to see what other people think of this series. So the next book that I picked up is Scarlet, Epstein Hates It Here by Anna Breslaw. This was another one that I'm kind of on the fence about. I gave it a 3.5 stars on Goodreads, and I enjoyed it. You know, it was a very short read. It was a very light read, kind of, sorta. I don't even know if that makes sense, but it was a very good book about a girl that writes fan fiction. You know, so basically the premise of the story is we have Scarlet Epstein. She goes to school. Her life is sort of monotonous, but she thrives on the fan fiction that she writes for this very popular paranormal show. And the show unfortunately gets canceled, and she doesn't have an outlet anymore. So she wants to continue to write fan fiction, and she starts to write fan fiction not about a show, but about the actual events and her actual classmates, what goes on in her high school, what goes on around her. Um, and, you know, it's a secret. Nobody knows that she writes this fan fiction, and, you know, it just revolves around that, and, you know, what would happen if people found out that she was writing this fan fiction, because it spills all the dirty secrets and all of the drama from all of her high school peers. So I thought it was okay, you know. It really didn't have a whole lot of substance, I thought. I thought the premise was really good, and it could have been a very thought-provoking book. Um, but, you know, and it did provide some sense of what it means to speak about people behind their back, what it means to hurt people and realize your mistakes and ask for forgiveness, and all of that. So, I mean, I just thought it was okay. The next book that I read was actually a reread, and that's Shadow of Night. Shadow of Night is the second book in the All Souls trilogy. The first book is A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness, And this was like the third time I'm rereading this book. I absolutely love this series. I've said it before in my previous videos that it's my favorite series of all time. And I wanted to reread the whole series, but unfortunately Ripset came about and I had to kind of put that aside. But I did manage to finish the second book, Shadow of Night. And I do plan on rereading the third book soon. So the next book that I read is a discovery, The Conspiracy of Us by Maggie Hall. This is such a good mystery book. I think if you love mysteries, if you love like Dan Brown's novels, I think you would really love this book. It involves a lot of historical facts, and it's just a wild ride. I think that and it's actually a series. I just bought the second book, which is A Map of Fates, and I can't wait to get started with that. So that is the next book that I read. The next two books that I read are the Red Rising trilogy. I managed to get through the first few, Red Rising and Golden Sun by Pierce Brown. And these two books are a science fiction fantasy book. It takes place in the future in a world where Mars and other planets are colonized, and or they're about to be colonized. It follows, the first book follows. So the first book follows Darrow. Darrow is a miner in the underground Mars colony, and they are working to sort of get the planet ready for people to live there. And they're very much, a slave society. But they continue to do it for the sake of helping humankind, because Earth is kind of, being used up, and they need to have a place for the people to live. And the government system is a color-coded system. So Darrow is a red, and all of the miners are reds, and they're sort of the lowest on the totem pole. They are the bottom of the food chain. They are the ones that service all of the higher up colors. And the colors are really cool too. Like the red, if you're a red, you have red eyes, and it's just, amazing. And the golds are the highest in the food chain, and they are the sort of the rulers of the society. And Darrow soon realizes in the first book that things aren't as he was told, and Mars is actually already colonized, and they're just being used. The Reds are just being used. So he has to infiltrate the Gold Society, and it's a really cool, really awesome, fast-paced, amazing series. And I do have the third book, Morning Star, and I do plan on reading that in June. The next book that I read was another book that I thoroughly enjoyed. A lot of the books that I read this past month I loved, and that's Me Before You by Jojo Moyes. This, again, I won't go into this book because I did do a full review, and I'll link it down below. But this book was just so beautiful and so thought-provoking. It's not, I do want to say it's not chick lit. It's not, an easygoing, fluffy book at all. There is some romance elements, but more than anything, it is just very thought-provoking and very moving. Powerful. That's all I can say. The next book that I picked up is What We Saw by Aaron Hartzler, and this was actually the Booksplosion book of the month, and that's what brought it to my attention. I don't always read what, Booksplosion does, but when I heard about this book, I thought, this one I want to give a try because it does sound very, very thought-provoking, and it does involve sexual assault of a young girl. So this book is told from the outsider's point of view. So it's told from the point of view not of the victim and not even of the assaulter, of the of the person who committed the person or persons who committed the crime. It's told from the outsider's point of view looking in. So, it follows, what's her name again? It follows Kate Weston. Kate Weston is, when the book starts out, she's hung over from a party that was the night before, and she has no memory of like the last 2 hours of the party. So a lot of the book is her trying to figure out what happened. How did I get home? What's going on? And she finds out that her best friend, took her home, and she learns the very next day at school that a girl, or one of her classmates, was sexually assaulted, and a bunch of boys were arrested as a result. And the whole book is kind of a mystery, kind of what happened that night, because she has no memory of what happened that night, so she can't even tell if she was there, if she saw anything, if her boyfriend saw anything. But it's very much a thought-provoking book, because this book really speaks to the pressure of girls in our society, of not speaking up, peer pressure, just the sort of the mob mentality of being a deer in headlights, and knowing something is wrong, but because of peer pressure, because of everything around you, you just don't know what to do, or you don't speak up. And I don't cry during books. I mean, it takes a lot for me to cry, but I did tear up a little bit with Me Before You, but more so with this book. I was actually surprised, because reading this book, especially with some parts I won't even say, because if you read this book, you probably know what parts I'm speaking about, but I almost had to like put it down and take a deep breath, and a couple of tears rolled down, because I was just so heartbroken by, what I was reading. So that is one of the books that I read in the month of May. The next book that I read is More Happy Than Not by Adam Silvera. I'll put a picture here. I just don't have the hard copy with me at the moment. More Happy Than Not, I feel like I'm going to get backlash or something. This is such a popular book, and it moved so many people and brought so many people, and it just circulated so much around BookTube. I didn't like that book. I wanted to like it so badly. It follows a young man who lives in Brooklyn, has a very tough life, impoverished, and he sort of a coming of age and coming to terms with your sexuality and your attraction to, he's very attracted to his a good friend of his, and I didn't understand. I felt like the narration was a disservice to the character. I just didn't understand the point of the book, especially at the end. And I can't really say, because I'll spoil the book if I give specifics. Maybe I'll do a discussion video around that book to really get my points across, and it'll be a spoilery kind of discussion, because I really don't know how to explain how I feel without giving away spoilers. But I didn't connect with it. I didn't understand the point of it, especially, what happened at the end, and I just felt bad for the characters all around, and I felt like a disservice was done to the characters in this book. And the last book that I finally finished, I just finished it last night, is Outlander by Diana Gabaldon. It's another book that I absolutely enjoyed. 5 stars. I'm going to be doing a full video review just of this book, because I enjoyed it so much. So much so that I immediately went on Amazon and purchased the next 2 books in the series. This book intimidated me for such a long time. I had it on my shelf for over a year, never read it. Always thought about it, but never read it. And now I'm just hooked, and I love the characters. I just think, oh, I'll speak about it in my review video because I could, if I start to speak about it now, I just could go on and on. But those are the books that I read this, in May. I almost forgot what month it was. Those are the books I read in May. And thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye.